What if the reason your mind feels so exhausted is that you are constantly trying to become someone else? Someone more successful, more productive, more confident, more intelligent, more peaceful, more spiritual. We spend so much of our lives trying to improve ourselves that we rarely stop to ask a strange question. What would happen if, for a moment, we stopped trying to become anything? This is where Zen begins. Not with a complicated philosophy, not with a promise that you will become permanently calm, but with something much simpler. Learning to see this moment exactly as it is. In Zen Mind Beginner's Mind, Shunryu Suzuki presents a way of approaching life that can completely change how you experience ordinary moments. The idea sounds almost paradoxical. A beginner knows less, yet the beginner's mind can be more open. An expert knows more, yet the expert can become trapped by what they already believe they know. Think about the last time you did something for the first time. You noticed everything. The sounds, the details, the possibilities. Now think about something you have done thousands of times. You probably barely notice it. The world didn't become less interesting. Your mind simply stopped looking.
That is the first doorway into beginner's mind. When we believe we already know something, curiosity disappears. We stop seeing the actual thing in front of us and start seeing our idea of it. This happens everywhere. You think you know your partner, so you stop really listening. You think you know your job, so you stop noticing new possibilities. You think you know yourself, so you keep repeating the same description of who you are. Even meditation can become another identity. I am a calm person. I am spiritual. I am someone who understands mindfulness. The moment you turn an experience into an identity, you may stop experiencing it directly. Suzuki's teaching points in another direction. Stay open. Stay curious. Meet each moment without demanding that it be something else. This doesn't mean becoming ignorant. Beginner's mind is not about throwing away everything you've learned. It is about not allowing what you've learned to close the door to what is happening now. You can have knowledge and still remain open. You can be experienced and still be curious. You can have strong beliefs and still examine them. Imagine walking through the same street you have walked through for 10 years. The first week, you notice the buildings, the trees, the people, the sounds. 10 years later, you may walk through the same street without really seeing it. Your body knows the route, so your attention goes somewhere else. This is useful. Habit saves mental energy. But habit has another cost. It can make life feel repetitive, even when every moment is different. The street changes, the light changes, the people change. You change. But your mind labels it the same. Beginner's mind interrupts that automatic labeling. It asks you to look again. Not because the street has suddenly become extraordinary, but because you are finally paying attention. This is one reason mindfulness can feel so simple and yet so difficult. The challenge isn't learning how to see. It is noticing how often you don't. We spend enormous amounts of time inside thoughts about the past and future. We replay conversations. We rehearse imaginary.
And the present moment is often much less dramatic than the stories inside our heads. You may be sitting in a room. There is a sound. There is breathing. There is a sensation in your body. There is light coming through a window. Nothing spectacular is happening. And yet, if you actually pay attention, the moment contains enormous detail. Zen invites you to stop demanding that ordinary life entertain you. You don't need every moment to be exciting. You need to actually be present for it. Think about eating a meal while watching your phone. You finish the food and realize you barely tasted it. The meal happened, but your attention was somewhere else. Now imagine eating the same meal without the phone. You notice the temperature,
texture, smell, taste, the rhythm of chewing, the sounds around you. The experience becomes fuller, not because the food changed, but because you arrived. This principle extends far beyond food. A conversation becomes deeper when you actually listen. A walk becomes different when you notice your surroundings. Rest becomes more restful when you stop mentally working. Life becomes more vivid when attention returns to where your body already is.
But there is a problem. The mind does not like staying where it is. It constantly evaluates. Is this good? Is this bad? Do I like this? Do I want more? How long will this last? What should happen next? We don't simply experience life. We immediately begin negotiating with it. Zen practice asks us to notice this tendency, not to fight it, not to force the mind to become blank. Just notice. A thought appears, you notice it. Another thought appears, you notice that too. The goal is not to create a perfect mental state. That itself can become another form of striving. I must meditate correctly. I must become peaceful. I must stop thinking. And now you're fighting your own mind. Suzuki's approach is gentler. Sit, breathe, be present. Let thoughts come and go. You don't have to chase them. You don't have to destroy them. A thought can simply be a thought. This is surprisingly difficult because we tend to believe every thought deserves our attention. It doesn't. Your mind can produce thousands of thoughts without requiring you to act on them. Imagine standing beside a river. Leaves float past on the surface. You don't need to grab every leaf. You can watch them move downstream. Thoughts can be approached in a similar way. You notice one, then another. You don't need to follow each one into a story. I remembered something. Then suddenly you're thinking about what happened 5 years ago, then about what someone said, then about what they might think now. 10 minutes later, you're somewhere completely different. Mindfulness is the ability to notice that you left, and then return. Not punish yourself. Return. This sounds simple. One of the most important themes in Zen is posture and breathing. Suzuki emphasizes sitting practice, often associated with zazen. The body is not treated as something separate from the mind. Your posture affects your experience. Your breathing gives you something immediate to notice. When you sit upright and pay attention to natural breathing, you are not trying to escape life. You are practicing being fully present in it. There is no need to manufacture a special spiritual experience. The ordinary breath is enough. This may sound almost too simple for the modern mind. We are trained to look for complexity. We want advanced techniques, powerful methods, secret knowledge, something that promises a dramatic transformation. But Zen repeatedly points back towards simplicity. Sit, breathe, pay attention. Do what you're doing. The mind wants to turn even this into an achievement. How many minutes did I meditate? Am I progressing? Am I more peaceful than yesterday? But the moment meditation... This reveals something important about modern self-improvement. We can turn almost anything into a project of self-optimization. Exercise becomes a way to build the perfect body. Reading becomes a way to become smarter. Meditation becomes a way to become calmer. Productivity becomes a way to achieve more. Even rest becomes something we try to optimize. The danger is subtle. We may spend our entire lives improving ourselves, while rarely experiencing ourselves. Zen offers a different possibility. What if the purpose of practice isn't to create a better version of you, but to become more intimate with the person who is already here? This doesn't mean you stop growing. It means growth doesn't have to come from self-rejection. You can change without constantly telling yourself that you are inadequate. You can learn without believing you are stupid. You can become disciplined without hating your current habits. You can seek peace without declaring war on your mind. Beginner's mind begins with openness rather than judgment, and openness creates something very valuable: the ability to see what is actually happening before deciding what it should mean. Consider how quickly we label emotions. Anger appears, and we say, "I shouldn't be angry." Fear appears, and we say, "I need to get rid of this." Sadness appears, and we think, "Something is wrong with me." But what if the first step were simply to notice? Anger is here. Fear is here. Sadness is here. The language seems small, but the psychological difference can be enormous. Instead of becoming the emotion, you observe the emotion. Instead of saying, "I am angry," you can notice anger is present. This doesn't deny the feeling. It creates a little space around it. In that space, you can choose what to do. Maybe you need to speak. Maybe you need to wait. Maybe you need to understand what triggered you. Maybe the emotion contains useful information. Or maybe it is simply a temporary wave. Beginner's mind does not require you to have an answer immediately. It allows uncertainty. And uncertainty is difficult for the human mind because we want closure. We want to know what something means. We want to know what will happen. We want to know whether we are making the right decision. But life rarely gives us complete certainty. We often make decisions with incomplete information. We meet people without knowing how relationships will develop. We start careers without knowing where they will lead. We make plans without knowing what will happen next year. The mind tries to reduce this uncertainty by creating stories. Sometimes those stories help. Sometimes they become prisons. This always happens to me. People like that can't be trusted. I'm not good enough. I'll never succeed. These statements feel like conclusions, but they are often interpretations built from limited experiences. Beginner's mind allows you to say, maybe. Maybe the future will be different. Maybe this person is more complicated than my first impression. Maybe I don't know yet. That small phrase, "I don't know yet," can be surprisingly powerful. It creates room for reality to surprise you. And reality often does. People change. Circumstances change. You change. A problem that looks impossible today may look completely different 6 months from now. A person you dislike may reveal unexpected kindness. A failure may open a path you couldn't see before. Beginner's mind keeps the door open. This is why Zen places such importance on letting go. Letting go does not mean becoming passive. It doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop demanding that reality obey your preferred script. You can have intentions without becoming attached to a specific outcome. You can work hard without requiring the universe to guarantee success. You can love someone without being able to control what they feel. You can prepare for the future without living entirely inside it. This distinction is subtle. Suppose you apply for a job. You prepare carefully, you practice interviews, you submit your application. These actions are within your control. But whether the company chooses you is not. If your entire emotional state depends on receiving the offer, you have handed your peace to an outcome you cannot control. Letting go means doing your part and allowing reality to respond as it will. This doesn't mean you don't care. Much of our mental exhaustion comes from trying to control what cannot be controlled. We want people to understand us. We want them to behave differently. We want the past to have happened differently. We want the future to be guaranteed. We want our bodies never to change. We want success without uncertainty. But life doesn't offer these guarantees. The more tightly we hold them, the more tension we create. Zen doesn't ask you to stop making choices. It asks you to see the limits of control. You can control your effort. You can influence your environment. You can communicate clearly. You can set boundaries. But you cannot completely control another person's response. You cannot control every event. There is another Zen idea that challenges modern thinking: simplicity. We often assume that more information means more wisdom, more options mean more freedom, more possessions mean more success. But more can also create noise. Think about your phone. Thousands of pieces of information can reach you every day. Messages, notifications, news, videos, opinions, advertisements. By the end of the day, your mind may be exhausted without having done anything physically demanding. The problem isn't simply the amount of information. It is the constant switching of attention. Zen points toward doing one thing completely. When you eat, eat. When you walk, walk. Imagine drinking a cup of tea while doing nothing else. You notice the warmth in your hands, the smell, the taste, the movement of swallowing, the quiet. Now compare that with drinking the same tea while scrolling through hundreds of posts. The physical action is identical. The experience is not. This is the power of attention. Attention is one of the most valuable resources you possess, because where your attention goes, your experience follows. If your attention is constantly pulled toward fear, your world feels threatening. If it is constantly pulled toward comparison, your life feels inadequate. If it is constantly pulled toward the future, the present can feel like an obstacle. If it is repeatedly pulled toward the past, today becomes secondary. Zen practice brings attention back. This idea becomes especially powerful when life is difficult. When something painful happens, the mind often adds a second layer of suffering. The event itself may be painful. Then the mind says, "This shouldn't be happening. Why me? What if this never changes? What does this mean about my future?" Now the original pain is surrounded by mental resistance. Zen doesn't promise that pain disappears. Instead, it asks you to meet experience without immediately adding a story to it. If you are sad, be aware of sadness. If you are disappointed, notice disappointment. If something hurts, acknowledge that it hurts. This doesn't mean you become passive or accept harmful situations. You can take action while remaining present. The distinction is between responding to reality and fighting the fact that reality has already happened. You can say, "This is painful, and I need to decide what to do." That is different from, "This should never have happened, therefore I cannot accept reality." Acceptance is not approval. Acceptance simply means recognizing what is already.
And once you recognize reality, you can respond to it. Imagine spilling a glass of water. The water is already on the floor. You can spend 5 minutes thinking, "This shouldn't have happened." Or you can get a cloth. The adult response is obvious because the situation is simple. Yet emotionally, we often do exactly the opposite. Something happens and we spend enormous energy arguing with reality in our minds. I shouldn't have trusted them. I shouldn't have made that mistake. I shouldn't be here. But the past is already on the floor. The question is, what do you do next? This is one reason beginner's mind is so powerful. It keeps bringing you back to what is actually here. Not what should have been here. Not what might be here. Here. Now. The next breath. The next action. The next conversation. The next decision. Life becomes manageable when you stop trying to solve the entire.
This doesn't mean planning is unnecessary. Zen is not an argument against preparation. Planning can be wise. The difference is whether your plan becomes a prison. You can prepare for rain and still accept that the weather is uncertain. You can prepare for an interview and still accept that you may not get the job. You can build savings and still know that life contains surprises. Preparation and attachment are not the same thing. One gives you readiness. The other demands certainty. Beginner's mind allows preparation without pretending to know everything. This is useful in relationships too. When you meet someone new, you may quickly create a story about them. They're confident. They're arrogant. They're kind. They're unreliable.
After one interaction, the mind wants a category. Categories help us navigate the world, but they can also prevent us from seeing the person. Beginner's mind says, stay curious. You can form impressions without turning them into permanent conclusions. Maybe your first impression is correct. Maybe it isn't. Give reality room to reveal itself.
The same principle applies to yourself. How often do you say, I'm just not that kind of person? Maybe you say you're not disciplined, not creative, not confident, not good with money, not good at relationships, not capable of learning certain things. These statements sound like descriptions, but they can become identities. Once you believe the identity, you selectively notice evidence that confirms it. Beginner's mind asks you to loosen the label. Instead of, I'm not disciplined, try, I'm learning how to become more consistent. Instead of, I'm bad at communication, try, I'm practicing communication. The difference is not positive thinking, it is psychological flexibility. A fixed identity tells you what you are. A beginner's mind leaves room for what you might become. This doesn't mean you can become anything instantly. Reality still contains limitations, but you don't need to turn today's limitations into permanent definitions. The person you are today is not a finished product, and perhaps you don't need to be a finished product at all.
This brings us to one of the deepest tensions in self-improvement. The desire to become better can quietly become rejection of the present self. You look at yourself and think, when I become successful, then I'll be happy. When I lose weight, then I'll feel confident. When I find the right relationship, then I'll relax. When I earn enough, then I'll enjoy life. The future version of yourself becomes the person who finally deserves peace. But the future keeps moving. When one goal is reached, another appears. There is always another level. Zen doesn't tell you to abandon goals. It asks you to notice the cost of making your current life conditional on future achievement. You can work towards something without postponing your entire existence until you get there. The walk toward the destination is still life. The ordinary Tuesday before the promotion is still life. The imperfect body is still your body. The unfinished career is still your career. The process is not a temporary period before the real experience begins. It is the experience. And this is where beginner's mind can change ambition itself. Instead of asking, how quickly can I get there? You begin asking, can I fully experience the path? You still work hard, you still improve, you still make plans, but you are less obsessed with escaping the present. Consider learning a new skill. At first, you are terrible. Every mistake is obvious. But because you expect to be a beginner, mistakes don't threaten your identity. You experiment, you ask questions, you try again. Eventually, you improve. Then something strange happens. You become experienced. Now, mistakes feel embarrassing. You think you should already know. You stop asking questions, you protect your reputation. The beginner was actually freer. This is why expertise can sometimes become a psychological trap. Knowledge is valuable, but certainty can become rigid. The best experts often remain curious because they understand how much they don't know. Beginner's mind isn't the absence of knowledge. It is the absence of arrogance about knowledge.
This is particularly important in conversations. Imagine someone telling you something you strongly disagree with. Your mind immediately prepares a response. While they are speaking, you're already constructing your defense. You're technically hearing their words, but you're not really listening. You are waiting for your turn. Beginner's mind changes the question. Instead of, how do I prove them wrong? Ask, what can I understand here? You don't have to agree. You don't even have to accept their conclusion. But you can become curious about how they arrived there. What experience shaped their view? What information do they have that you don't? What are they afraid of? What do they value? This doesn't make you weak. It makes your understanding larger. And sometimes you discover that disagreement contains information. You may still hold your position, but now you understand the other side better. That can make your own position stronger, not weaker. A closed mind protects itself from being changed. An open mind allows new information to enter before making a decision.
Zen also has a different relationship with effort. In modern culture, we often believe that more effort is always better. Work harder, push harder, do more, optimize everything. But sometimes excessive effort creates tension that makes the task worse. Think about trying to fall asleep. The harder you try to force yourself to sleep, the more awake you can become. Or trying desperately to remember someone's name. The harder you force the memory, the more it disappears. Or trying to appear confident in a conversation. The more you monitor yourself, the less natural you become. There is a kind of effort that is necessary, and another kind that creates unnecessary resistance. Zen practice explores this distinction. You sit with intention, but you don't force the mind to produce a particular experience. You breathe, but you don't need to manufacture a perfect breath. You remain present, but you don't need to create a dramatic...
Think about a musician learning an instrument. In the beginning, they consciously control every movement. Eventually, practice allows the movements to become natural. If they become overly self-conscious during performance, they may become tense. The skill is there, but excessive control interferes with expression. Life can be similar. We can become so obsessed with controlling ourselves that we lose spontaneity. We monitor every word, every facial expression, every decision, every mistake. We become spectators of our own lives. Beginner's mind invites us back into participation. You don't need to watch yourself constantly. You can simply do the thing. This doesn't mean acting without awareness. It means awareness doesn't have to become self-surveillance. There is a difference between being present and constantly evaluating yourself. The first creates freedom. The second creates tension. This is why Zen can feel almost ordinary. It isn't trying to turn you into a supernatural version of yourself. It is inviting you to inhabit ordinary life more completely.
And ordinary life is where practice happens. Washing dishes, walking, eating, working, listening, waiting, sitting. These moments can seem insignificant because we are trained to value events, promotions, vacations, celebrations, achievements, big changes. But most of life is made from ordinary moments. If you spend your life waiting for extraordinary experiences to feel alive, you may miss most of your actual existence. Zen turns attention toward the ordinary, not because ordinary things are secretly spectacular, but because attention itself can reveal depth. Washing a dish can simply be washing a dish. This doesn't mean you stop thinking. Thinking is useful. Planning is useful. Analysis is useful. But thought should be a tool, not a permanent environment. Imagine using a hammer. A hammer is useful when you need to hit a nail. You wouldn't carry it around hitting everything simply because you own one. Thoughts are similar. They are useful for solving problems. But when there is no problem to solve, constant thinking can become noise. You replay the past, even though you cannot change it. You predict disasters that may never happen. You rehearse conversations that may never occur. You analyze people who aren't present. You create imaginary futures and then emotionally react to them. The mind becomes busy without producing any.
This distinction between thinking and being lost in thought is subtle but important. Imagine you're driving and suddenly realize you've been thinking about an argument from yesterday for the last 10 minutes. You are physically driving, but mentally somewhere else. The moment you notice, you return. You see the road, feel your hands, hear the engine. That moment is not a failure. It is awareness returning. The same thing happens in meditation. You notice you've been thinking. Return to the breath. Again and again. This repetition is not wasted time. It is the training. Over time, you may begin noticing distractions sooner. You may also notice emotional patterns before they become actions. Someone says something irritating. You feel the first spark of anger. Instead of immediately speaking, you notice the sensation. A few seconds of awareness may prevent an hour of regret. That is the practical power of presence.
Another important theme is non-attachment. We naturally want to hold on to pleasant experiences and push away unpleasant ones. When something feels good, we think, I want more. When something hurts, we think, make it stop. This constant pushing and pulling can create instability because everything changes. The good mood changes, the bad mood changes, relationships change, bodies change, careers change, seasons change, even our thoughts change. If your peace depends on keeping everything pleasant, peace becomes impossible. Non-attachment doesn't mean indifference. It means enjoying something without demanding that it remain exactly as it is. You can appreciate a beautiful sunset while knowing it will disappear. You can love someone while understanding that relationships are not possessions. You can enjoy success without believing success must last forever. This creates a different kind of appreciation. Instead of gripping the experience, you fully experience it. And because you are not demanding permanence, you can let it change when it changes.
Think about a sunset. You don't usually become angry because it is disappearing. You know the disappearance is part of the experience. The beauty is not destroyed because it ends. In fact, the ending is part of why you pay attention. Life is similar, although much harder to accept. We want relationships, youth, health, success, and security to remain stable. But impermanence is built into existence. Zen does not treat impermanence as merely a depressing fact. It can also be an invitation to pay attention. If you knew this moment could not be repeated, would you experience it differently? The conversation with someone you love, the meal, the walk, the ordinary morning, the sound of rain, the laughter of a friend. We often assume there will always be another opportunity to notice. Sometimes there isn't. This doesn't mean living in fear. It means living with awareness of change. When you understand that moments pass, you may stop treating them as disposable.
This also changes how you think about success. Success is often treated as a destination. Once you reach it, you imagine life will become stable. But every achievement changes the starting point for the next desire. You get the promotion, then wonder about the next promotion. You buy the house, then think about renovating it. You reach one goal, then create another. There is nothing inherently wrong with ambition, but if your identity depends entirely on reaching the next level, you may never experience arrival. Beginner's Mind offers a different relationship with achievement. You can accomplish something and still return to being a beginner. You don't need your success to become your identity. A successful person can still ask questions. A knowledgeable person can still say, I don't know. A leader can still listen. An expert can still learn. This protects you from one of the most dangerous psychological traps, believing that because you succeeded once, you now have to protect the image of being successful. Once reputation becomes more important than learning, curiosity starts to disappear. Imagine a person who built a successful business. At first, they experimented constantly. They listened to customers, they tried new ideas, they were willing to admit mistakes. Success arrives. Suddenly, people praise them as an expert. Now they feel pressure to always have the answer. They stop asking questions because questions might make them look uncertain. They reject ideas that challenge their established model. Their previous success becomes the very thing preventing future learning. Beginner's Mind protects against this. It says, remain willing to see again. Your previous answer may have been correct then, and
You are allowed to discover that an old goal no longer fits. That can feel frightening because identity is built around stories. I am this kind of person. This is the life I chose. This is what I have always wanted. But life is not a contract with your younger self. Your values can evolve. Beginner's Mind gives you permission to meet yourself again, not as a fixed character, but as a living person. This is one reason the practice of returning to the present is so powerful. Every return says, I don't have to remain trapped in the last moment. Yesterday's mistake doesn't have to define today's behavior. Yesterday's success doesn't have to define today's expectations. Yesterday's identity doesn't have to define today's possibilities. The present is not completely free. There is also an important lesson about discipline. Zen practice can appear effortless from the outside, but regular practice requires commitment. Beginner's Mind does not mean casually doing whatever feels comfortable. It means returning again and again. You sit even when you don't feel like sitting. You pay attention even when the mind is restless. You begin again after distraction. This repetition is important because transformation rarely comes from one dramatic insight. It comes from returning. You return to the breath, return to the present, return after a mistake, return after anger, return after distraction, return after losing yourself in comparison. The word again becomes incredibly important. You don't need to be perfect. You need to return. Think about learning anything difficult. You won't stay focused every day. You won't make perfect choices every day. You won't always be patient. The practice is not avoiding failure. It is reducing the time between losing your way and returning. That is a much more realistic definition of progress. And perhaps this is why the beginner's mind is so compassionate. A beginner expects mistakes. An expert who believes they should already know everything may experience every mistake as a threat. If you give yourself permission to be a beginner, learning becomes less humiliating. You can ask the basic question. You can admit confusion. You can start again. This is useful far beyond meditation. Imagine starting a new career at 35. You will not know everything. Imagine learning a language at 40. You will make embarrassing mistakes. Imagine rebuilding your finances after years of poor decisions. You may feel behind. The fixed mind says, Zen also challenges our obsession with becoming special. Modern culture constantly tells us to stand out, build a personal brand, become exceptional, be different, be extraordinary. There is nothing wrong with excellence, but the desire to be special can create endless comparison. If someone else succeeds, your success feels smaller. If someone else is more attractive, intelligent, wealthy, or accomplished, you feel behind. Beginner's Mind offers another possibility. You don't need to be extraordinary in every moment. You can simply be present. A cup of tea doesn't need to become a life-changing event. A walk doesn't need to become content. A conversation doesn't need to produce a lesson. Sometimes an ordinary moment is complete simply because you experienced it. This can be surprisingly liberating. Imagine no longer needing every experience to prove something about you. You can enjoy a hobby without monetizing it. You can learn without posting about it. You can rest without justifying it. You can spend time with someone without documenting it. You can do something simply because you enjoy doing it. This is closely connected to ego. The ego wants to know what an experience says about me. Am I successful? Am I respected? Am I good enough? Am I better than them? Am I improving? Even spiritual practice can become ego-driven. Am I more mindful than I was last month? Do people see me as peaceful? The desire to improve can secretly become another competition. Zen repeatedly brings attention back to direct experience. You don't need to create a special identity around awareness. Just be aware. You don't need to announce that you are calm. You don't need to prove that you are spiritual. You simply practice. This is one of the reasons simplicity can feel radical. It removes the audience. When nobody is watching, what remains? What do you actually enjoy? What do you actually value? What are you willing to do without recognition? Those questions can reveal more about you than any personality test. And perhaps the beginner's mind is...
Now, imagine applying this to your phone. Every time you experience something, you may feel an impulse to capture it. A beautiful meal, a sunset, a trip, a celebration, a moment with friends. Photography isn't the problem. Sharing isn't the problem. The question is whether documentation has replaced experience. Sometimes we see the world through the imagined eyes of an audience. Will this look good? Will people like it? Should I post this? Beginner's mind asks you to experience the moment before turning it into content. Look first. Feel first. Listen first. If you later want to share it, fine. But don't let the imagined reaction of strangers become the filter through which you experience your own life. Your life does not need to become evidence that you are living well. You can simply live. This is another form of freedom. You stop asking every moment to perform for an audience. And when the audience...
There is a quiet strength in not knowing. We often fear uncertainty because it makes us feel powerless. But uncertainty can also create openness. If you don't know exactly how your life will unfold, you cannot control everything. But you also don't know what good things may appear. A closed future is one where you already know the answer. An open future contains possibility. Beginner's mind lives in that openness. You don't know everything about the person you are becoming. You don't know every opportunity that will appear. You don't know which difficulty will change you. You don't know which ordinary moment will become a treasured memory. That uncertainty can be uncomfortable, but it is also where life gets its freshness. Think about meeting someone new. If you decide immediately that you know exactly who they are, curiosity disappears. If you allow yourself to discover them gradually, the relationship remains alive. The same is true with yourself. Don't assume you already know who you are. You may still surprise yourself. And perhaps the most practical way to cultivate beginner's mind is to deliberately do ordinary things with full attention. Take one meal without your phone. Walk somewhere without listening to anything. Have a conversation without planning your response. Sit quietly for 10 minutes and notice your breathing. Do one task without switching between 5 others. Look at something familiar as if you have never seen it before. When irritation appears, notice it before reacting. When joy appears, notice it without trying to hold it. When uncertainty appears, allow yourself to say, "I don't know yet." These practices are small. They may even seem too small, but the mind is trained through repetition. If you constantly practice distraction, distraction becomes easier. If you repeatedly practice returning attention, returning becomes easier. If you constantly react, reaction becomes automatic. If you practice pausing, the pause becomes available. You are shaping your mind through what you repeatedly do. And that means mindfulness is not simply something you do. Eventually, the deepest lesson may be that you don't need to add another identity to your life. You don't need to become the mindful person. You don't need to become permanently peaceful. You don't need to eliminate every thought. You don't need to achieve some perfect state. You simply need to notice when you have left the present and return. Notice when you are judging and become curious. Notice when you are controlling and soften your grip. Notice when you are performing and return to the experience. Notice when you are certain and ask what you might not know. Notice when you are living in the future
and feel the ground beneath your feet. This is beginner's mind. Not knowing everything, not demanding certainty, not assuming that the familiar is fully understood. It is the willingness to meet this moment without forcing it to become another moment. And perhaps that is why the teaching can feel both ancient and surprisingly modern. We live in a world of endless information, endless comparison, endless stimulation, and endless pressure to improve. Zen offers something radically simple. Stop for a moment and actually be here.
Less. It asks you to remain open despite what you know. It does not ask you to abandon ambition. It asks you not to sacrifice the present in pursuit of the future. It does not ask you to stop feeling. It asks you to experience feelings without becoming completely controlled by them. And perhaps the greatest transformation is this. Ordinary life begins to feel less ordinary. The same morning becomes something you actually see. The same person becomes someone you are willing to listen to again. The same breath becomes something you notice. The same life becomes something you finally inhabit. You don't need to find a new life. You may only need to arrive fully in the one you already have. That is the invitation of beginner's mind. Begin again. Look again. Listen again. Breathe again. And meet this moment as if, for the first time, you have never seen it before.